We're going to open the Q&A to the floor shortly, so this is your chance to start thinking of your questions, and some IPA people will start moving around with mics in mysterious ways to let you hear. But the question I wanted to put to both of you was, maybe we'll go with Susan first so Dom's voice can recover. Oh, it's a good voice. If only my voice was that gravelly, how much better my life would be. But Rory talked in his introduction about how this creates a language to talk to clients with. I just wondered, in your lived experience of doing this, was it difficult to sell to clients? Did it help in that way? And what was the experience of introducing this thinking to them and selling it as an idea?
We worked very closely with the train line, so we were building the strategy together with them. So it wasn't a big reveal moment in that sense. We'd worked through a lot of things together. I think there were elements of it that were instinctive. We knew that the saving was our biggest in to people, and there was a sort of a group consensus that actually just saying another saving wouldn't help us. I think it probably proved more useful to sell it in to certain other individuals and to keep the campaign going.
Who are these certain other individuals? That's normally what people say when they mean creatives, is it?
No, I wasn't meaning creatives. There's a lot of other people involved in the train line, and they're also venture capitalists own. So there's other people that you need to convince along the way.
So that would absolutely be to Rory's point. If you want to have a discussion with venture capitalists, if you go and talk brand onion, that's a bad moment. But if you talk economics, they're very excited.
And it was very tight on the behaviour we wanted to change. Yeah. It was very specific. And so therefore, framing everything in behaviour change made a lot of sense. And they could see the economic benefit of doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's true. So it's important to remind ourselves that clients do not want advertising. They want their customers to do something.
Yes.
And advertising is a way of achieving that, fortunately. Otherwise, we would be in trouble. But and talking about that behaviour change seems a far more business-connected thing to do than talking about advertising, which is really a root to that. So, Don, what was your experience of
I've got to say, honestly, it's one of the best career things in my life working on the teacher recruitment. I absolutely loved it because we just had a gang of us, and in terms of a client and inter-agency groups, and we all just got on. We just really liked working together, and it was just very clear that we needed to do something differently. So I think it's to that point we had a very different target audience, which were older career switchers, and a very clear behaviour that we needed to stimulate. And then we were all reading behavioural economic stuff anyway, so Tim Harford and Dan Ariely and all of that sort of stuff. So it was quite a natural thing. I mean, I remember at the time, we took the agency over, what was then DDB, and we got 5 meeting rooms and just commandeered a floor for 5 hours. And one room was a chunking room, one room was an anchoring room, one was a whatever.
Sorry.
And it was like we just got the client and the people involved in the project in and gave them a crib sheet beforehand and said, this is what chunking is about. And literally you go through the whole mix and it'd be, right, what are the ideas of things that we could do? How would this apply to the challenge that we face? And we came out about a list of 150 things we should be thinking. And obviously you've got to prioritise it. It was just a lot of fun. I mean, honestly, and then we turned it into the comms plan, which was the formal one-page with 4 roles for it and all that. But the reality is we had a really clear goal, a really clear focus, and they had a lot of fun doing it. And then we monitored it super closely during the campaign. So across the year, I'd have to stand up and present right across the system or how everything was doing. So it was kind of, I don't know, it was almost like a good bunch of people that were like-minded people that had a common goal.
An observation, then I'll bring Rory in and then I'll go to the floor. But an observation is that when you do those kind of brainstorming sessions with behavioural stuff, so you get 150 ideas, all which they add up. Whereas if you're doing they're multiplied together. Whereas if you're doing a thing where you go, what's the big idea? Every idea is in competition with the other ideas, so it's always an argument. I wonder if that you felt that contributed. I guess that you might just had a brilliant relationship with your client. They might be very nice people, but I was wondering, do you feel the extent that as a way of working, as a way of thinking, Because it's
What's
the ideas are non-competitive,
additive?
whether that helped with that relationship.
Yeah, I mean,
and therefore getting the work
maybe
done.
it changed the terms of engagement, sort of, in terms of what an idea is, and to that extent, and sort of so things like partnerships and social was a massive thing. I mean, I don't think we really sort of realised how ahead of our time maybe we were on stuff like Facebook in 2008, 2009. You know, sort of, it just seemed like a natural. It felt quite natural. I think the one major criticism I'd level of a campaign is we couldn't really touch the website. Actually, ironically, we couldn't touch the application form of the website. That was all sort of locked in stone, tablets of stone. We weren't allowed to go there. No. But that notwithstanding, I mean, clearly it was, you know. It did what it was effective nonetheless. Did what it needed to do.
Just an interesting question. What you in a sense had is a classic, sometimes called the last mile problem, which is there's no shortage of desire. There's just a lack of conversion of desire into action. And strange thing about the whole approach of marketing, to me, if you talk to someone who's a cybernetician, okay, who's talking about a complex interconnected system, what they'd always recommend is optimize the last mile first. That's the first thing you should do, because only when you've removed the constraints and inefficiencies in that will you get the biggest gain from improving previous miles. You know, do you see what I mean? Now, strangely, that was taught to me in about 1989 by the old school direct marketing copywriters, who said a very weird thing, as seemed to me at the time, completely counterintuitive to the rest of advertising, which is they said, when you write an off-the-page ad, but these hardly exist anymore, but this was an ad where you sold something from an advertisement in a newspaper, okay? And the old advice the direct marketing guys used to give in the 1930s was start with the coupon. Because they said if you don't get the coupon right and the choice architecture within the coupon right, you can write the best headline in the world and it still won't work. So the thing to optimize first is the last point of consumer contact. And the strange thing about marketing is we always do it backwards. We try and create desire before we've actually spent any time trying to improve the conversion of desire into action. When you may actually get lucky and find that there's quite enough desire there already, what you were just failing to do was you'd created various behavioural bottlenecks. And the other thing is the return on investment is disproportionately good in doing small things. It is those tiny little discoveries you might make which are probably the most important thing you can do. It's the things close to the point of decision or action, the last mile things which get the biggest return. And all the things that actually achieve the biggest returns in this business get the lowest status and are actually given attention last, which to anybody who is kind of an engineer would seem completely deranged. And start with a coupon. I didn't really understand it as a piece of advice when it was first given to me. I thought, what a weird way to write an ad. No. Clever headline, please. And then we'll actually delegate the coupon to somebody else. And yet, I now understand from a sort of cybernetician's point of view, they were absolutely right. That is the way to work. It's the way to start close to the problem. I always remember someone saying they worked for, I think it was Diageo, for something like 15 years, and they said one thing they did in one day was basically more important than the rest of their working life. So what the hell was that? I was responsible as a complete byline for Slow Gin, Gordon's Slow Gin. Any fans? Brilliant, by the way. Okay, and said one day I just decided we'll put it in the same bottle as ordinary Gordon's gin, and we'll put it alongside Gordon's gin on the shelf. So that was it. She said, everything else I did my entire working life as a marketer was totally secondary and irrelevant compared to that decision. By the way, of course, Slow Gin is less alcoholic than conventional gin. It's half as alcoholic, in fact. So the margins are spectacularly high, and you can therefore, bizarrely, you can price it pretty much at the same price as ordinary gin. And people go, ooh, it's purple and it's like gin. And they go and buy it, okay? Now, what I find very strange about this whole business is that we're absolutely kind of preoccupied with the heroic. And that's not wrong, by the way. I mean, there are heroic reframings of things which are wonderfully important and huge. But there is this very peculiar reluctance to accept the fact that actually probably the most important thing you'll do in your working life is actually quite small. And, and again, is there something... I mean, you could argue the same thing actually about... I don't know if anybody here is a historian, but when you see a reason attributed to a military victory, the victors are always completely dishonest because they attribute it to their own genius and their brilliant strategy. The only people who are actually honest about a military result are the people who lost, who are desperate to attribute it to something really trivial and stupid. If you actually look at most major military battles, the deciding factor was something quite small. But it doesn't make you a great historian. And King Henry V isn't going to go back going, really fucking lucky at Agincourt. It was really muddy, and the French had metal shoes, so they got stuck. Okay? That's basically what happened at Agincourt. The archers were not decisive. The decisive fact was that the archers, unlike French aristocrats, did not wear metal shoes. They had cloth shoes. So when the French aristos got stuck in the mud, these Welsh archers could go around with cloth shoes and massive hammers and hit them in the head. Must have been fucking class, I have to say. But I mean, what I'm saying is that the weird urge to have a heroic reason for a big result seems to be one of the biggest behavioural biases of the lot, right?
I've got another question for you, which I'm just tickled by. Okay. How many of you have got science A levels?
Ooh. Oh, that's good.
Okay, and how many have got art? Okay. Well, just
Humanities as well, yeah.
Humanities and stuff. I mean, sort of, what it strikes me, what's interesting about what Rory's sort of touching on is that, that certainly for me, I can see in a marketing landscape two very different schools of thought. One of them, the school of the conceptualists, certainly from a planning side as well, but I'd argue from creative too, the conceptualists, the dreamers, if you like, the romanticists, the artists. We're the ones that sort of like to have ideas, their grand theories of everything. And then the guys that are sort of eating our lunch, the engineers. And that's kind of the world of digital, the world of data, the stuff that plugs together. And I think it's really now. Kind of the schools have always coexisted, whether or not it's direct response or an advertising or whatever. I don't think this is necessarily a new thing, but I think hardcore digital agencies work sort of. If you speak to planners that work in them, they're very different animals to the planners in creative agencies, and it's not just the skill sets; it's a mindset thing. I think it is to do with the engineering side of the small details that count. And I kind of wonder whether there's an interesting thing for the industry to think about in terms of the recruitment of people and all the rest of it. It raises some quite big questions. So if the small things are as important, if not bigger than the big things.
Yeah, and the metaphor I often use is that if you've got a dam, there's water behind the dam, and you need to get the water to the other side of the dam. And you can raise the water level or lower the dam one brick at a time, right? So raising the water level in a massive flood is very glamorous, and that's pretty much what we've done. And taking the dam just down brick by brick so it goes over so you take the water that's there anyway, as you had the latent demand. That's unglamorous, but that's where it is. I can just say that so things you do in your career, it's probably made a difference. Early on in my career, I think I did briefly make a difference. So I'd like to recount that moment because it's never going to happen. But working on it was at Ogilvy, and we doing some work with the Child Support Agency, which if you've ever had dealings with, which I hope none of you have, but it's now gone. But it's if you get a letter from the Child Support Agency demanding money you feel you don't owe them, or you've had a particularly acrimonious or unpleasant divorce, whatever, you go through the roof, and the call centre would be bombarded with people wanting to scream at people in the call. We listened into some calls, and it was one of the darkest experiences of my life listening to calls. I said, well, can't you just put a line on the letter that says, our call centres are busy in the morning, you may want to call in the afternoon? Right? They said, oh yeah, we'll try that. And apparently it worked very well, right? It seemed obvious, right? Now, of course, that you've solved the problem because the post doesn't arrive to the afternoon. So the Royal Mail have sort of liberated you from it. I know it seems incredible that once upon a time letters actually arrived in the morning before you left the house, so even if you had all you'd done with your life was father children illegitimately. So at this point, I wanted to throw... I know, we did this. I met this guy in Essex. He was 21 and he had 5 children with 5 different women. I thought, I know, I was at a certain level. I was impressed, but appalled at the same time. So, obviously, and now I'm just impressed. No, so I'll throw it over to the floor. So who has a question? Okay. So there's a gentleman in the back there. I've seen you as well. We'll go with you next. So.
Hi. So I was quite interested in the trainline.com stuff because I work in a performance team, which is rebranding of direct response. And so what you were just saying now is quite interesting because essentially we do approach things. If we get a new bit of business as well, actually, we'll start with what is their website. It's a sales channel, and you work your way out from the sales channels. You go, you optimize that, you sweat that out. Anything through conversion, the PPC, sweat that all down. But going right to the, so we do talk funnel still. So going right to the top of the funnel with the Trainline stuff, I thought it was quite interesting the way, and one of our challenges, the same ones you come across, and occasionally with performance advertisers, they don't necessarily have the creative budget a lot of the time. So you spend a lot of money on media, and the creative budget isn't there to actually do the job in the first place and change behaviour, and that's what we're needing to do a lot of the time. But with the Trainline example, I was wondering whether there was an element of it which was just about, and I don't want to sort of put a dampener or anything, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate, but it's about availability. And having prior to the trainline.com, there wasn't necessarily the awareness of the other available purchasing options. And all they had to do was just tell people they're there, and that would change the behaviour because it opened up the availability of something.
Okay. In the Trainline's case, they'd done a lot of the things that you mentioned, so sweating all of that purchase funnel. The website at the point even we launched this campaign was very tested, very proven. There was one change that I'll mention that came off the back of the creative. They'd actually been around for 10 years. At that point, we started to communicate them back in 2009. They'd put some communication budget for just raising awareness up until that point, and they were actually slowing down in growth. And talking to people, awareness of the trainline.com was pretty high. Like, people had heard of it, but they still weren't purchasing. The basic job of awareness wasn't bad, but they hadn't got a reason to do it. They hadn't got a reason to change their behaviour. So the Trainline were quite enlightened that they put a fairly substantial budget, not dramatic, but pretty good behind the campaign around this price framing campaign. It wasn't the only part of the campaign. There is also a long tail of this campaign with a lot of retargeting in particular that they do to make sure that if someone has shown an interest or looked up a particular journey, they will follow them and they will try and make sure that you get all the way through the process to purchase. The one thing that did change on the website as a result of having a price framing was people's cynicism about pricing is, I'll never achieve it. You have to be standing on one leg on a full moon to get the saving you talk about. Whereas actually it's incredibly achievable. You just needed to know trains a little bit to see it. So the main difference we made on the site was actually at that point where you pick your tickets, your saving was calculated and totted up as you went. So your saving was given to you in pounds and in percentages. So you felt good about making it. You knew you were one of those people getting one of those savings. So it's a relatively little, simple thing to add to the site. And it was reinforced at the point when you actually purchase, and then when you're given your tickets. And even customers, we started off the back during this campaign to send annual emails to anyone who bought on the Trainline, telling them the total they had saved in the last year, just to keep them going. Because we pretty much worked out if we got someone to purchase tickets 3 times, that was as good as keeping them. That was the key. So it wasn't just a one-off hit. We needed them to come back.
So I think that's it's the difference between creating awareness, which you've done, and creating a behaviour. So people something to do seems to be their thing. But from your point of view, you might particularly want to read the in the publication. There's a study for Fiat for their portal, And their premise was they couldn't afford to outspend other car brands in terms of awareness, but they could make their website where you could specify a car and so on better than anyone else's, so they could convert far higher. And you'd think, well, they're all, I mean, every car manufacturer has a thing where you can go on and look at the cars and change the specifications and see the one you want. You know, surely they all work about the same. But they don't. There are dramatic differences. And by doing that, Fiat, I think, managed to, they have double the conversion of some of their competitors through that site. And for £1 million spend, they create another £5.1 million in qualified leads. I don't commit all the papers to memory. It just comes across like that. So, okay, so we go to the next question. So, Jen, go.
Just very quickly, though. Sorry, your
yes.
point about the parsimony of budgets you receive in terms of conversion activity compared to the lavishness of other budgets is completely weird. And part of it is just that, I mean, part of it's inexplicable. Part of it's that people are weirdly uncomfortable spending money on intangible things. I mean, I was actually a non-executive director of a government website where there was a huge debate about whether you spent some, it was a 5-figure sum on a site redesign. And I said, how much, we were sitting in a kind of crappy series of meeting rooms. I said, how much did it cost the last time you redecorated these rooms? And they said it was about £40,000. I said, these rooms are used by about 500 people a year. This site is actually visited by 10 million. And because the thing's kind of electronic, you get this very, very strange thing that people are spectacularly grudging. And incidentally, I mean, the people aren't rewarded in that field for the contribution they make either. It's very, very strange.
Right, so thank you, Rory. So I'm keen to get to the questions, because at the end of it, at least one person will come and say to me, you didn't get to my question in a really gruff way, and it spoiled my evening. So this gentleman here was next up. If other people want to start waving hands, I will try to clock you. I see you, sir.
I guess my question is sort of for the panel and touches on what Dom was saying, in that it would be great to hear your thoughts on the kind of dynamic between behavioural economics and creativity, in that I've got a client which is rationally quite a lot, it's a challenger brand, and they improve on things that the rest of the big players in the market do in lots of different ways. And when I've done research and talked to people, the thing that really nails it is when you frame what they're doing in terms of competitors, right? So you say, they do this, we do that. They do this, we do that. And it really hits home and it's really punchy. But at the same time, it leads you down quite a rational route. And it's, for me, quite... it might just be a facet of the client, in that it's lots of little things. I guess it's a bit like you were saying about little things. It's lots of little things that they do better that make them as a package so much better than the big guys. But in a way, it leads you down a bit of a dark alley in terms of that creativity that we know, really connects with people and sells. So it would, I don't know, just be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Who wants to have a go at that first?
What's your question?
Well, I think something...
So I suppose, so if I could try and paraphrase, is that if you start concentrating on these sort of like all these tiny little incremental things, there's no big idea to bounce creativity off. You surrender that. I mean, I would just say, reviewing the papers, there are plenty in there which have incredibly well-liked, well-loved. I mean, so like the Like Brands campaign is well-loved, right? And there are, I think there's lots of really nice creative work in the TDA campaign. There's not, it's not like we've collected together papers there that only have like embarrassing creative work. There's really nice stuff in there. It might not be going to get like a Cannes Lion, but then that's a different thing. But I'd be interested, Dom. Was your question just what's the question, or? It's. I mean, are you going to?
No, I was just toying. I mean, what's your client?
They're an ISP.
Okay. Challenger brands are brilliant brands, right? Challenger brands is where you need to apply creativity, and I think you can be very active in framing. I had to get some behavioural language in there. Framing or depositioning the competition. And I think it's your duty to deposition the competition. It's your duty to make the rest of the market seem irrelevant. It's your duty to find a position in culture or a purpose which chimes. Or, I think clearly there are lots of small things, the from to things, which you've already hit on and can give you leverage. Great. That's for me only a part of what will make a true challenger brand sort of slices through culture and sort of surfs on the back of each wave. So Paddy Power being sort of a very obvious example, but on the surface it seems to me it's a fairly bog standard bookmaker with I'm sure fairly bog standard rates and doors across the high street and online presence and all the rest of it. The way it comes across in its marketing is this whole other thing with the rainbow laces thing and the chav tranquilizers and all this, all the many things it's done over the years. It's kind of all of which have bugger all to do with rational stuff. And I mean, I'm not sure if it goes quite as far as depositioning the competition explicitly, but in its behaviour, it kind of feels like it's sort of more fun, more relevant, more now, the first one you'd turn to. So, I mean, there are many other, there's a whole literature on challenger brands and how to, not necessarily how to apply behavioural economics to them, but sort of framing is a big part of what makes challengers sort of a sharp arrow. Because you've got to be smarter because you're not going to outspend a competition. So I think this is probably be the best client you ever work on. I think you just got to ask some sort of really pokey questions, and some of those should be about the role the brand plays in culture and in the category and all that.
I thought it'd be good to know. Rory, you're the creative up here. I mean, if someone gives you a series of little things a client does, do you feel that's a dark alley?
Well, the first thing to say is that. Really great advertising is more likely to actually work if you optimize the other stuff. That's a really important point because my point that you can produce fantastic advertising which fails at the last mile, I think is fair. I also think there are fantastic products which have failed because they were simply presented in slightly the wrong way. That's a really, really important point there. The idea that the assumption of economics with perfect information is that the virtues of your product are immediately apparent to the people buying it, and they aren't. However, of course, there's a great creative route in just creating an extraordinary vehicle or spokesman. Compare the Meerkat, for example, creates this one overarching thing which enables them to say lots of other little things. And I think that what you might call the meta idea, the importance of that doesn't go away. You have to have a cohesive brand. People have to understand why you're doing it, not only that you are doing it. Who the spokesman is that you choose, or whatever that is, has a huge effect. And in fact, one of the biggest findings in behavioural economics is exactly this, that our brains kind of work by inference. They don't actually work through logic. They're not actually, in a sense, how would I describe it? They're effectively inference-making engines. What can I deduce from this particular piece of communication? So you will creatively be able to create an environment or something in which the other things just make, the cumulative things just make more sense and zing much more than if they're than if they're blandly stated. So no one's actually saying this is an argument for really boring stuff. There is an argument for getting some of the boring stuff right, because otherwise you could produce a fantastic ad which is then written off as a failure for reasons that had nothing to do with the advertising at all. And that's a really, really important thing. If you optimize the other stuff, advertising will work well, therefore you'll get more money to spend on it, and you can do more spectacular and more heroic things. If you don't optimize the last mile, it doesn't matter how good your advertising is, you won't get much more money to do it again because it didn't even work the first time. So I think, one of the things you have to do is we have to understand that we're working within a system or ecosystem. There is a point to be made, however, which is I don't think, it'd be very interesting, you're mostly planners here, I'm guessing you? Since it's your greatest sexual fantasy to win an IPA Effectiveness Award, I can't imagine there's anybody else in the room, to be honest. But But there is a point made by people like Dave Trott, I think very reasonably, that there isn't, we always pretend in advertising there's a kind of process, okay? And what an advertising agency's methodology is they take the last really famous and successful ad campaign they ran, for which they're known, and they reverse engineer a process that they can claim led to that outcome, and claim then that that's their effective magic sauce for all future marketing activity from now until the end of time. My view is there isn't really, if you're looking for an idea or a breakthrough, there are lots and lots of tools you can use. I don't think there's any set order in which you should deploy them. And I think where I would criticize the conventional advertising approach, and Dave Trott does this much more eloquently than I do, is he said, every bloody person starts with the brand. It's always, this must be a brand problem. And typically, the advertising agency gets to the problem first. Whoever gets to the problem first gets to define the problem in the convenient terms of their own proposed solution. So if an economist gets there first, if a management consultant gets there first, the answer will be business process re-engineering. If an advertising person gets there first, the answer will be some sort of brand activity. But I genuinely don't, I think there are very valuable tools, and I think there are different lenses which you can deploy to look at the world in a different way and see things which other lenses won't reveal. But this business, as Dave Trott says, of everything must be a brand problem, because obviously we're an advertising agency, so we must define the problem in terms of our own favourite solution, is just intellectually dishonest. I think sometimes that, I think there are cases, I have made myself hugely unpopular sometimes by saying, actually the answer here is to be less creative, by the way. I'll be candid about that. And I'll give you an example of it. There was a product, funnily enough, in the ISP category, without getting too specific, okay? If you take the upgrade to fibre optic broadband, okay, you get basically about, typically 5-10 times the speed for about an extra £4. Right? And the System 1 brain looks at this and goes, hold on, I'm getting 70 meg here, which is 10 times as much as I get at the moment, and I've only got to pay an extra 15% monthly to get 10 times the bandwidth. System 1 brain goes, fucking result, easy one, right? Okay? 10 times as much, not much more. It's not, okay. And what we were doing was selling it with lots and lots of bloody exotic brochures and information and dramatization. I said, that actually is a case of cognitive dissonance, because if it's that easy a sale, 10 times as much for not much more, £3 a month or £4 a month, just say that. The more you attempt to sell it with hard sales material, you'll actually just arouse suspicion. Because brain looks at it, proposition, really easy decision. Hold on, if this were really that easy a decision, why are they selling it to me so hard? Okay? Because it's a bit like someone comes to you, if someone comes to you and says, I bought you a pint, oh, thanks very much, nice pint. I bought you a pint, do you like the pint? I chose it for you specially, look, it's yours, are you going to drink it now? My natural reaction is, he's probably pissed in it or something. You basically brought me a nice thing on a plate and now you're selling it hard. My natural human reaction is not, wow, it's uh-oh. And so I did actually go into the creative department there and said, write a 3-paragraph letter, okay? And you'll get, and sure enough, plain envelope, 3-paragraph letter, response rate went up by, I think, a factor of 4, by removing stuff. And so there are cases where it actually say, blood donation would be a simple case, okay? Okay, tick yes. If you're some sort of weird crank who doesn't want to be a blood donor because you like to watch other people die, tick this weird box over here. Okay, that's not fantastically creative, right? But actually, if you do loads, and the government's done tests of this kind, if you do loads of colourful marketing-ese things around blood donation, showing loads of smiling people, it reduces the number of, or it's organ donation, I'm sorry, it actually reduces the number of people.
It's something you're taught in salesmanship. So if you're selling something face-to-face and you can tell they've bought it. I used to, one of my first jobs was in a station to see selling fountain pens. There's a lovely fountain pen for you, sir. And you could tell they like it, and then you shut up. Because if you say anything else, you give them reasons to say no. At the moment, they're working really hard to say no to spending £100 on a pen. right? And you want to give them no reasons to say no, and the best way to do that is to remain silent. And it's really difficult because you want to go, oh, and it's like this, and the wife will be impressed, and they, no, she won't, keep it, right? So you should shut up at that point. So the gentleman on the end there, and if I'd like to see some more hands waved, like a question from question from a lady or a gentleman. Otherwise, I would get a hard time about that. Brilliant, thank you, madam.
I've got a question for you, Nick, I think, which is the two case studies that you focused on tonight. It seems to me the insight was sort of born out of the customer journey. And I suppose as a media planner, I suppose we often think about the customer journey, whereas this might be totally wrong, but when I see a creative brief from an agency, I don't often see a customer journey box on it. So I'm just wondering, of the 68 or however many it was case studies that you read, how many of the insights and the input was coming from media versus creative?
That's a good question. I would say, I mean, as Dom has said, his paper was co-authored with a media agency, so there's that part there. I mean, there is a sort of, I mean, the small nudges one, which are the ones that most explicitly focus on the customer journey, are they tend to be written by. From memory, there is more input from the media agency. I mean, it's tricky because it does do who decides to write the paper to some extent. There's not a sort of a direct correlation between how things actually happened. But I think what it also reflects is there's just a shift in our world where we can now create and manage more touch points, and agencies can offer to do that more and more campaigns can be about the customer journey. I think before in the sort of, when the awards started, TV was still a very dominant media, and it was its own special art, and other people did. And we'll make people want it, and then it's own to sales.
And one crucial thing, I mean, as recently as about 1995, 2/3 of ad spend was packaged goods, okay? Where you had, this is mid-90s, where effectively there was some retailer or somebody else who controlled all the choice architecture and controlled the environment in which the thing was sold. So you could argue that focusing exclusively on advertising was not an unreasonable thing to do then, because that was the only thing you could influence, okay? The rest of the things were beyond your control, and as Nick points out, beyond your measurement as well. So spending time optimizing something you couldn't control and couldn't measure wasn't a great use of your time. If you look at the ad industry now, less than 1/3 of ad spend is in those categories. It's gone down from dominating to actually being a minority. The huge growth in ad spend has been in areas such as, for example, insurance comparison websites, ISPs, mobile networks, which are a completely different form of customer journey, and where the degree of control and measurement you have over all aspects of that journey and deciding what to optimize is much, much broader. So, I mean, the game has actually changed in any way, regardless of anything else.
So, okay, so I'm keen to get one more question in. So
more than that.
Well, no, we're meant to finish at 8 o'clock. We will hang around, so you can mix with your public afterwards informally. So the lady in the front row, I think you had your hand up. Was it you? Yeah, it was you. Yes.
Thank you. So a bit of an open question. From your experience, do you have any sort of advice or tips for not only creating a behaviour but maintaining it for a long period of time? And the reason I have this question is I'm just trying to understand how to use behaviour economics for actual clinical trials and patient retention, because we work for a healthcare agency. So we're trying to see, so it's not really purchasing anything, but it's trying to create this behaviour and maintain it for, it could be up to 2-3 years. And their adverse events, there's loads of things to consider. So.
Well, there were a few examples from the Trainline campaign where we had a very clear first behaviour we wanted to achieve, but we also knew we needed people to come back. And so we looked at what reinforced that first decision that they made, in this case, the savings and feeling good about the savings. And we chose all the times and the moments to reinforce that. So on the site, the saving reinforced. The follow-up emails that reiterated the saving you just made. The annual emails that told you your annual saving. And also station media. So if you had forgotten again and started to lapse and gone back to buying at the station, you will often see at certain points in the year stations like Euston covered in Trainline advertising, reminding you that actually you've just done the stupid thing or you've just done the clever thing. So I think spot the moments when the behaviour can be reinforced, or spot the moments when people would dropout or the adverse events.
And I think to pick up the thing about reminding people of what you have done for them. So I suspect many people here use SwiftKey, the keyboard replacement app.
Yep.
And SwiftKey does this thing that sends you a little message that says, you've saved 5,000 strokes by using SwiftKey. And it says, you saved 10,000, right? And otherwise I'd be unaware of the benefit of this superior keyboard. And I think that's so genius that it counts them up and it tells you. And this thing where I've done some work on clinical trial stuff and adherence programs, that they're very they tend to not reward people for doing the right thing very much. They don't sort of say people don't get monitoring where they just sort of ticking box every day, and so they have to take their pills every day. But there's nothing to say, well done, you took your pill every day. It's and people will be surprised with the drugs that people fail to adhere to. So if you have an organ transplant, for example, you have to take drugs to suppress the immune reaction to the new organ. You think that if your liver, the new liver you waited so long for is basically going to go on strike and march out of your body, you'd remember to take the tablets. Not the case, right? People go, I'm bored now, I just want to die. We think it's not rational, right? And so building programs that do that is lack of adherence is an extraordinary thing.
Very good book by Nir Eyal called about habit creation. A really important thing. You can. The other point, by the way, to answer this thing, the sort of creative science divide, which I think is a bit of a false dichotomy anyway, but I regard as a creative solution, any case where the best answer to a problem is slightly counterintuitive. And your job as a creative person is to always rail against the default obvious answer. And talking to Dan Ariely about this, one of the interesting things is that people who design pills, okay, always assume, because it's a completely logical default assumption, if we can make these pills really... Is it not? Oh, sorry. If we can make these pills really easy to take, then it'll be much better for everybody. And one of the points Dan Ariely makes is actually, you know the just add an egg case study, one of the most famous advertising case studies. Sometimes, as Dan Ariely says, actually the best thing you can do is make the pill taking a bit difficult. So you've got to get some water and mash something up, because then you create a ritual around it, which actually makes the behavior more likely to replicate. If you make the pills really easy to take and really small, people forget whether they've taken them. If you can create a bedtime ritual around it, which actually, where weirdly and counterintuitively you add a degree of complexity, it actually works better. And that's all. I mean, this is my creative point. All I'm looking for is non-obvious. The joy of the non-obvious.
Yeah, I think it's sort of another way could be the framing side of things, like through the rituals. So it's a kind of what's the equivalent of have a break, have a Kit Kat in the marketplace? Is there a kind of a particular set of, is there a moment in time or a set of a sequencing of something which just kind of becomes an automated behaviour? So it's essentially a cue, a sensory cue.
And the paper that does that is the I've already mentioned the smoke alarm paper. So when the clocks go forward or the clocks go back, that's the time to check the battery in your smoke alarm. And that sort of piggybacking thing, the king of writing about, there's a guy called B.J. Fogg who writes out of Stanford, and he writes about persuasive technologies and creating these kind of loops. He's absolutely brilliant at that. So at this point, I have to say we are out of time. So I want to say thank you to Dom and to Susan, to Roy for joining on the panel. I want to say thank you to Connor and the IPA events team for organising this tonight. I'd like to say, although I don't think either of them are actually here, thanks to Jonathan and Tessa at the IPA who helped edit and put the publication together. Putting publication together is always a ball ache, but they make it really easy. So thanks to them. But most of all, thanks to you for coming. Everyone, a big round of applause.